Domestic violence, surviving a tormented soul, a mother's story. Hello everyone, welcome to Signpost for Living with Dr. Kirsten Hunter, and we have a very special guest today. We've got Michelle here, Michelle Major. Hello darling.
How are you, Kirsten?
I'm good. Thank you so much for coming.
You're very welcome.
Scale of 1 to 10, how anxious are you feeling right now?
Probably a 2.
Really?
Maybe a 3.
That's pretty good. A lot of people come on and they actually get really anxious, which then we get into it and they're all good.
Okay.
So that's good news. So, okay, we're talking about domestic violence and we're talking about your personal story.
Yeah.
Which I think is so incredibly valuable for you to come along and talk about. I know a lot of women clients who have, been through, in the middle of, or just coming through domestic violence, and, it's a very isolating experience. We don't know what we're in the middle of. We don't have language around it. And I think doing these sorts of podcasts, it's a resource so people can relate and feel less alone and, just have some hope and some skills. So I'm really passionate about this.
Yeah.
So I'm really rapt that you've decided to come along.
Pleasure.
Okay, so everyone, just a bit of a interesting context here. Michelle and I haven't seen each other for many years. We first met 16 years ago.
That's right.
Which we just worked out, hey.
2006.
And you just come through the door then and we're like, hello, great to see you. Yeah, and we've just had a little bit of a chin wag before we've come in and really had quite a lot of revelations that you weren't aware of.
That's right. I'm still, probably a good thing I'm sitting.
Yeah, just reeling from. So those revelations we'll kind of end the podcast with, but they're pretty enormous, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
And with those, you don't know that this story's had significant meaning for me because it had an impact on me in the end, which you didn't know, and I thought you knew. So anyway, we'll explain all that at the end. But major punchline at the end of this podcast. Major. Okay, so I've never told you this, but 16 years ago, you arrived and you reminded me of kind of like a really scrawny alley cat. You were kind of extremely drawn.
Yeah.
You were struggling to put words and sentences together.
Yeah.
You were apologising for just being here. You were a shell.
Yeah.
You were a shell. Always had a massive, gorgeous heart. And you could see that you had 2 beautiful boys at the time who were aged 7 and 9.
That's right.
But this resounding, gorgeous heart, but this shell of a person. And I looked at you and I thought domestic violence. I just looked at you.
Yeah.
It was obvious. So when did you turn up here relative to leaving this domestic violence relationship?
I left the relationship while I was still in the town that I was living, and I lived with my parents and, of course,
Moved
my
here?
2 boys. No, it was in the same town.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so it wasn't far from there, and I just said to my husband at the time, you need to get help. And he didn't, although during the marriage he had promised every now and then that he would get help in moments of weakness. There, of course, that was never said in front of anyone else other than myself. And I had gotten to the point where I had pretty much been acting out a part in that I didn't want anyone to know what was happening, and the closest to reality I could ever get was to, when we were out in public, pretend like it was all okay, and I'd look at people whose marriages I thought were okay, and I wanted it to be like that, even though home life was hell. I I had really kept it hidden until it got to a point where his behaviour affected the boys so much I had no choice for their sake but to go. And I thought that the kindest thing and the best thing to do would be to give him that opportunity. So it was a small town and I was able to move, into my parents' place with the boys, hoping that he would do something, hoping that would trigger a change, that he would actually understand that it couldn't. I was not prepared for the boys to be there in that situation anymore.
Can you give a bit of information about what happened behind closed doors?
Yeah, sure. If I was to go back a bit, really, from the day we were married, his behaviour towards me was he just enjoyed playing with you psychopathically. I didn't even know what psychopathic was actually until I got out of the situation and I contacted a lady who had been in a relationship with him prior to me, and she'd been with him on and off, and she said, because I'd said, what is this? And she was actually in Singapore at the time, and she said to me, "Shall look up psychopathy."
Psychopathy,
and she said, "You'll tick every box." And she started telling me of her experience with him, and she was tearing pages out of my diary, really. So his behaviour with me, it was like if you've ever watched a cat playing with a mouse and how the cat enjoys letting the mouse almost get away and then just dragging it back in and until it's at the point where it's barely alive and it just drags out that suffering. That's what he was like. But it got to the point with the boys where I realise now he must have sensed that there was a certain type of a strength in me that I wasn't just going to go under. And he...
Not when you had your two boys to protect.
That's right. That's right. And it got to the point, I remember getting home from work one day and a few things that happened with the boys even prior to this, particularly the elder one. But I came home and they both ran out and they were both crying, and they said that he'd had them on the bed with this big wooden reeler and he was just belting them. What's your mother saying about me? What's your mother saying to you about me? Whack. What's your mother saying about me? Whack. And I realised that it must have been that fear and that paranoia in him, in that he, I think, assumed that I would not be strong enough to walk away or to tackle him on this, and he was then, it extended into him being violent with the boys. Was
that a first time, or was he routinely violent with them?
Not routinely. There were things. My mum and dad were there one night. We'd had a barbecue out on the back deck, and I went inside. And I don't know. I'd have to ask Mum actually exactly what happened, but she said my husband, reached out and he backhanded Jack with his fist and got him on the side of the head, and Mum said, had he not, and I don't mind mentioning names, had Jack not grabbed the table, he would have just hit the floor. And I do recall my husband kicking Jack in the chest, as he went down the hallway. So there were things like that starting to happen. And that's when I drew the line. And I remember my sister way prior to this saying, "Shell, what's it going to take?" And she said, "You're going to get to the point where something will make you go."
So your family saw it, your family knew. You couldn't hide. You know how you were trying to present well to the society, to the world, not to your family. They already knew.
They were seeing it, yeah.
And how did you react when they would call you on it? Would you minimise it, defend it? Just be...
Gosh, that's a very good question, actually. I'd have to really dig back into my memory to think.
Because a lot of people feel the strange sort of, they feel stuck, they're not ready to leave yet because they're too scared, they're too immobilised, and they can feel pressure from their family even though it's love.
Yeah. No, I always knew I had my family's 100% support. And his violence with the boys was just prior to my going.
Yeah.
So I didn't hang around there with that going on for a long time. What had happened though, I find it hard now. I'd have to look back in my diaries to actually get a timeline on this, but I remember going to work one day, and I worked for myself, and I had a friend who was a client come in, and I just burst into tears, and that was the first time I told anyone anything, and she said, you have got to go and see someone about this. You've got to, you can't hide this anymore. And I did what I thought was the right thing, and I went up to the outpatients, and of course then it was, we have to tell the authorities, we cannot. And I was absolutely terrified because I thought, as soon as they're involved, he will revenge. He will win them over, he will charm them, and I won't be believed, and then I'll be in for it.
Because this capacity to charm people, to have them think well of them, that superficial charm, which is part of psychopathy.
Yeah.
And very, very manipulative, two-faced. You know, street angel, home devil.
Yeah, he was the typical darn good bloke. Yeah, he's a good bloke, that bloke.
Yeah, just a good guy. Yeah. Let's go back and so what? I mean, there's different types of abuse. There's physical abuse. There's psychological abuse. There's financial abuse. There's sexual abuse. Which were coming your way?
Definitely, to start with, it was always psychological, terrible psychological, and with me there was a little bit of physical, and then with the boys it was very physical, and definitely financial. Yeah, definitely. Always that pressure, and I see it now. There was a real objection to any of the money that I earned being saved.
Really?
Yeah, because for them now, I understand a little bit. That's a threat. If you have a bit of money up your sleeve.
Yeah, you've got independence, you've got autonomy.
Yeah, and if you go, you've got something. You're not. They can't starve you out.
Yeah. Do you mind me asking about the physical abuse that he would do? Like, what was the frequency? What was the context? What would happen?
With myself, I remember him punching me and saying he would get help. That was just the once, really, that I remember him doing that. Adam was a baby at the time. With the boys, he only started to do that. He didn't really have an opportunity. I don't know how far it would have gone. Actually, I have a bit of an idea now, but at the time, it was just that afternoon when the boys came out and they were an absolute mess, that I went over to my mum and dad's that night. Yeah.
So he seemed to be doing more physical towards the children than to you.
Yep.
Really? Did you feel physically unsafe with him?
Definitely. I got to the point where I would sleep out on the veranda. I couldn't really sleep. I went for a long time trying sleeping tablets on top of sleeping tablets, and then out of desperation, just for that sheer exhaustion of not getting sleep, I went, I'd go around to my mum and dad's and try and block out all the windows and hide the car so no one would just drop in for a friendly visit if they saw that I was there, and just try and sleep, but I couldn't.
You couldn't sleep, and did he mind that you weren't in the bedroom with him?
Probably. I can't recall.
So
I guess his fear was of exposure. So if no one really knew about it, and I wasn't telling anyone about it, it wasn't as much of a problem.
So, I mean, that time he hit you was horrendous, right? But for you to feel such physical fear, why? Was it he was close to being physical with his abuse? Was it intimidation in his manner? What?
Yeah. There was an awareness of what he was capable of, and it really is like an evil presence because.
How did you know what he was capable? I believe you, but I'm just. Can you put language around how you had a sense of what he was capable of?
Yeah. Okay. When the degree of cruelty psychologically is so high.
The enjoyment of that.
Yeah, there literally is an enjoyment of that, and that delighting in making an absolute mockery of you. It's just so indicative of a person's state of heart that if they not only do that but they enjoy doing it to that degree, that there's no way that you can feel at all safe. And if they're, and he was of the frame of mind where he was just sort of playing with me and enjoying it, that's another element. That's not a person who's got a mental problem and is just lashing out and is genuinely sorry, even though that is not right. This is a person who is making a point of doing it and enjoying it. And I don't think people who do that have limitations.
Mm-hmm. I have a lot of clients who have domestic violence situations, and often they don't leave until some physical escalation happens, and there's a serious threat of murdering them. Often strangulation is the one that kind of is the final straw. So then they get charged, they go to court, etc. And the individual says, that wasn't the worst bit. That was the obvious thing, but the worst bit was the psychological that went on for years beforehand. But this person's not being held to account. Mm-hmm. And can I just make a point as well? It's really important that we don't make this gender-based, because I've had a lot of men be the victim of domestic violence from women.
Yeah.
And they actually have incredible gender bias trying to go through the court system because they think, well, a woman couldn't do that to a man, which is complete crap. So just to put that out there as well.
Absolutely, because it's psychological. Yeah, and I have heard that said too, that people will often say that if they had to choose between the two, they would choose the physical abuse over the psychological.
Oh, there's no question. Yeah. Psychological's the worst, sexual's in there somewhere, and physical is the least.
Yeah.
And it's the psychological part of physical that's the issue.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
But yet it's the physical that we can communicate, we can show bruising.
Yep.
It's what can be, proven through the courts.
Yeah.
It's more indisputable.
Yeah.
It's really upside down. It
really is, because it's a hard one to prove. It's happening. I have a friend and
you kind of can't prove it, actually, unless you have video imaging and such like, and I don't know what the legal ability is, but it's just it's horrendous. And when did you realise it was domestic violence? When did you realise this is a toxic, abusive relationship?
Not until I'd gone, really. I knew it wasn't right, and I knew it was... I was literally just trying to cope. It was like I had to keep my sanity. So it was as though I did everything I could to appear completely normal to my best ability on the surface, but just peddling like mad underneath. And I remember I would hear the boys, but I wasn't listening. I couldn't. Because the stress was that high, and I remember it was just it really was all I could do just to keep my sanity and function. And it was when I got out of the situation, because I had no idea what this was, and I decided to phone this girl who had been in this relationship, with him prior to my marrying him, and she said, Michelle, when I left, she said, I doubted my I doubted my mental faculties, and she said he would just about spit on her and say, you're never going to amount to anything, and that was just typical of how he was.
That's very degrading.
Yeah, and she, funnily enough, went on to she joined the police force, and then she became a criminal psychologist, I think, criminal psychologist, and then she was working kind of undercover over in Singapore. So she did very, very well, very well for herself. A great lady, yeah.
There you go.
But she was the one who made me aware that it wasn't me, because I still had that attitude. What have I done? Or you even when I was in that situation, you've people sort of in your ear, and I guess it was a bit of a thought of the day, back then, that if you treat people long enough how you want to be treated yourself, they'll come around.
Yeah. Yeah,
No.
which works well with somebody who's well-meaning, learning,
Exactly right.
trying to put their hand up.
Exactly right. But there lies the difference. And she was the one who enlightened me as to what it was. And she was absolutely right. I looked it up and I did tick every box.
There you go. So that would have been quite confronting and liberating at the same time.
Yeah, it was. It was.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but I knew I was in for hell, because now it was on. I had dared to leave, and I had dared to expose what was happening.
So his religion was public opinion, and you'd gone and said, I'm choosing to leave you. There must be something wrong. This isn't a rosy situation.
Yeah.
So you moved out to your parents' place in this small country town.
Yeah.
And that's, 3 hours from where we are here in
Yeah.
Toowoomba, which is in southeast Queensland.
Yeah.
When did you leave that town?
I left the town in September 2006.
So how long were you with your parents before you left the town?
Oh, that's a
Do you get
really
what I
good
mean?
question. I honestly can't remember. I would have to look back in my diaries.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Was it a small amount of time or medium?
It wasn't too long. I remember one of the policemen coming to me and saying one night, I'm particularly worried. I've studied these types of characters, and I really think you need to go. And I remember I was at my parents' place, and I just had to get as many things as I could together and literally go that night. Yeah.
And you and we met. You moved to Toowoomba, and that's when we met. Is that correct?
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Had these two little boys who needed help, and I thank God for you. Actually, I really do. I do. I mean, it could have been anyone, but you were the right one.
And I mean, I worked with the boys, but I worked with you as well. I think that by you bringing the boys, you inadvertently got support for yourself. And,
that's right.
And I don't think when women and men leave domestic violence, they advocate enough for themselves and get enough support for themselves. When you've got children, you prioritise them.
That's right.
And in doing so, I ensured that you got that support that you well and truly needed.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're exactly right. Yeah. It was them that I was concerned for, but very, very a great help for me. Thank you.
And you were setting yourself up. That was a big deal, wasn't it? To set your world up, set the kids up. And
I was very fortunate. I have a beautiful sister and brother-in-law, and we lived with them for nearly a year.
Right.
And I was able to pick up work in Toowoomba, firstly through my brother-in-law. He was working for a particular company. But, and I honestly, they had 2 children of their own, and they just made room. They just put their 2 in one room together and moved their office gear into their bedroom and gave us 2 rooms between the 3 of us, and it was wonderful, absolutely wonderful, until I finally was able to get to a point where I was able to rent a house nearby.
Get your own space.
Yeah.
Which would have been extraordinary, to create a home that was safe and where you could create that culture yourself. What was that like, to create a safe space?
Look, really, 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 really good. I must admit, though, that I was still going through, it took me years before I could go to the letterbox without shaking for fear of what I was going to, the next letter I was going to get from his solicitor and what they were trying to do. And so I still had that fear of what I knew he was trying to do. But the comparison for me being on my own with the boys and having my family around me and supporting me, even if I hadn't actually, there's just no question I, for the boys' sake, was prepared to stay where I was, and the difference was incredible. But it took me quite a long time to get to the point where I was able to really relax and hear the boys. It took a long time to get to the point where I started to settle inside. A long time. It didn't happen.
No. So, we talk about being in crisis mode when we're in our sympathetic nervous system, and we're in panic response. We're in survival mode, and we're hypervigilant to any threat around us, and you're just like urgent. And that's a long way from being able to be quiet and open and playful with our children, and be able to kind of absorb where they're at and be sensitive to where they're at. So that's the parasympathetic nervous system. So, it takes a lot of healing to come off the cliff and to realise, okay, I've actually got a safe space, particularly when you've got issues going through with family court. And I can't remember the detail, but I'm guessing there was issues with him not happy about the children being away, and also, I'm guessing, and also finances, I'm guessing. Yeah. Because that would have been very much a pride thing for him.
Very much so.
Not losing.
Yeah.
Losing would be not good.
That's right.
Power.
Yeah. He had decided that I was going to go back to that country town, and he had the house picked out that I was going to live in, which was an absolute dive, and it was right on the corner where there was zero privacy whatsoever. And of course, to his way of thinking, where he lived with the horses and the paddocks and the really nice house would have been way more appealing to the boys. That's what he would have been thinking. But yeah, he
so
knew,
you're like a puppet. He's
he
just
knew what car I was
up.
going to drive, and I was going to have a Toyota Camry because that's what he decided I was going to have, and I was going to live in that house, which was an absolute dive. And sort of like a piece of furniture. I'm just going to put you there. Yeah, and I think it's also a deliberate attempt at humiliating a person, punishing them for daring to take them on.
Yeah, a big theme of us talking a moment ago was revenge and punishment.
Yeah.
Fear of revenge, fear of punishment.
Yeah.
Yeah, because he had that vindictive kind of quality.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we talked about in the title, a tormented soul. Like, you've got to be pretty tormented to be that, vexatious, that desiring of revenge.
Yeah, yeah. It's really a fear, I believe, that these types of people have. They can't be at peace, can they?
How can you be at peace if your value system is so incredibly destructive?
Yeah, exactly.
How can you have peace?
Exactly.
Which is why I think it is a very tormented soul. I hold them accountable, but I have great empathy for them, because it's such a tragic situation.
It is.
They can't be content. They can't be happy.
That's right.
So what was the hardest thing about getting your new world established and you getting into that new chapter?
Probably for me, feeling safe, from the point of view of at the time I had no idea just how far he intended to exact out his revenge. So the hardest thing for me was to try and enjoy my boys and get them to a point where they felt safe and relaxed too, when this was still all going on.
And you had this ominous sense that he just wanted revenge on some level.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he wasn't done. He wasn't done.
You knew that.
Yeah.
And how you reminded me of a story then, which I'd forgotten completely. The time that he actually turned up at my psychology practice.
Yeah.
I had completely forgotten that.
Yep.
So tell the story there if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Because I don't remember it.
Yeah, okay. So I had really just started seeing you.
How did he know?
And that's a good question. That's a really good question.
That's scary.
Yeah, very good question.
The only people that would have known you were coming were immediate family and dear friends, surely.
Yeah, I don't know. But there are a few things like that happened. I don't know how he knew.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I had really gotten out of town with clothes for the kids and myself and the car, and I had a phone, and lived with my sister and brother-in-law and their 2 kids. And I had driven my sister's car, left. For some reason I knew, and maybe I'd heard from people in the town that I just knew he wanted the car. I knew. And so I'd left the car actually locked up in my sister's garage, and policeman lived next door. He knew about it. But and driven her car in and left it quite a few blocks away from your clinic.
So you even were that concerned to leave a car a few blocks away from... That's how fearful you were.
Yeah.
Far out.
Yeah. And because I knew, like, he wanted to leave me with nothing.
Mm.
Yeah.
Which is revenge as well.
It was his car.
Yeah. There's no sense, is there, that when you separate in a relationship, it's a shared pie, and both parties are of value, and it's like the whole pie is mine. Yeah. And if you've got anything, you've got mine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I remember sitting in there with you, and you had word from your receptionist at the front that he was there, and he was demanding to come in, and he was demanding to see me. And of all things, I remember this now, he said he wanted to take me out for lunch afterwards or something like that. Yeah. But you were... She was very much onto it too. And somehow you dealt with it and shooed him off.
Go me, I don't remember.
No, it was a long time ago. But I managed to, weave my way back and get into my sister's car and,
there you go.
Get back home.
That's fascinating. No memory of that at all.
Mm.
So what happened with the court case? What happened? I mean, we don't want to get into the nitty-gritty, but more, I'm interested in how stressed you were for how long, and how you got relief from that.
Yeah, okay. So we had property. I'd actually had a house of my own before we were married that he insisted I sell, and at the time it sold for a slight loss, which was a bit of a pain. But I started working straight away when I went out there, and we ended up...
What's your work background?
I was doing sports massage, deep tissue massage.
Yep.
Yeah, so out there I was extremely busy because people out there preferred to have that treatment rather than drive all the way into Toowoomba for a chiropractic appointment.
Sure.
Yeah, so I was very busy, and I got wind of... it was just a real inkling that things were moving in this town. Something was happening. And I started asking around, and just even over the road from where I work, I just sort of started to ask what was happening. You'd hear things, and then it was pretty much confirmed that they were looking at mining, and it might be a pretty good idea to purchase property. And I presented this idea to my husband, and he didn't like the idea at all. And then I had someone in as a client who I knew my husband would respect with regards to the opinion of this particular person, and this person said, no, you should buy some property. So we did do that.
So you listened to this man?
Yeah, yes. So then, of course, with court, I remember because my husband was unwell at the time, and this was another thing too, I knew that when I left it would be the beginning of the end. So there'd always been that that hope that he would get help, which he'd promised to every now and then to do, and that
psychological help.
Yeah. And so because he had been so unwell, I was juicing and...
What do you mean? So physically unwell? Can you explain?
Yeah. He was diagnosed with a brain tumour, and so of course it's not... It's a mixture. Even when the behaviour is so bad, when that happens, it's another element.
There's more stress on the top. And
yes. So the long and the short of it was, we'd buy organic fruit and veggies and get them shipped out there, and
so you did your best to look after him.
5 times a day, all that sort of stuff. But he got to the point where after I had left, he became unwell again and had another operation. And during that time, he had a friend of ours represent him in a mediation session, and they proposed that I receive. Now here I am with 2 little boys, 7 and 9, and I always thought they'd probably both go through university. I just thought they would. One has. But they proposed that I receive, I think they started at 21%, and they were serious. Now this fellow who had been a mutual friend was a family man and had a wife and kids of his own, and I just could not believe that he could even entertain the idea.
Well, to be honest, I've had lots of people propose much less than that. So you got to a point where this all got wrapped up and you had relief?
Yes. And it was just really, I was in fear of going to court, because he had this ability to be able to swing people and
charm people. But the family court is usually very much about facts and figures and rules and people having rights, dare I say.
That's right. And I wasn't even game enough to even go there. What you're saying is correct. Yeah. But because of my experience with him, I just didn't want to go there. And I had decided what I thought would be a fair figure with regards to what the boys would be left with and what I could,
survive on.
Yeah, survive on. And so because he was getting really unwell, it dragged out, and in the end he had other people looking after that for him, and it was just agreed on that. I just did what I thought was honestly the most reasonable thing, and
you got it sorted.
Yeah.
Well, it must have been a relief when you had that sorted.
It really, really was.
Yeah, people just describe it as life-altering to get all that behind them.
Absolutely.
The fact that he was so sick, he had a brain tumour, and he was so sick that he needed people to help him. Did that make you feel safer?
Not really, no, because he'd had a brain tumour and then an operation, and it was actually quite a miraculous thing in that normally with a glioblastoma grade 4, a person is pretty much written off, within 12 months. And for him, that was not the case at all. And we were doing a lot with diet and all sorts of things too. But he had an operation again quite some time later. Yeah. Okay. And so, he was quite well. He would come home from the first operation. He had radiation, and then the first operation, and then would get back into work.
Did this confuse the picture for you, because he was a sick person, and when someone's sick, you obviously have compassion for them?
There's definitely that there. Absolutely.
Did that confuse you?
For me, I just, there's just that you want to do what is the right thing to do. You know, there's that. I know that if I'm pure-hearted, that's life. That is not that's just the way to go, you know. And so there's nothing. So you have such a clear conscience.
So you wanted to do the right thing by him.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
So
And that's why it was not until his behaviour affected the boys like it was, I had to draw that line in the sand.
Yeah.
I didn't consider
so
I had a choice.
Yeah, so him being unwell actually kind of prolonged it, and because you had compassion in there.
Yeah, well, one of the things I did do is that I contacted the surgeon who we had become, we'd come to know quite well, and he said to me, and I asked you exactly the same question, I got exactly the same answer.
Did you?
Yes. I said to him, I said, is this brain tumour exacerbating or causing, this violence? And he said, no. He said he just won't be able to hide it as well as what he has in the past. And I asked you the same thing, and you said the same thing.
Yeah, I would say that.
Yeah.
You can tell me about my history. Here we are talking about you, and you can tell me. You remember a lot more than me.
So that helped me from the point of view of knowing that what he was doing was not something. It wasn't a case of him being unable to help what he was doing.
And the surgeon would be able to tell you which part of the brain that was, and whether it was causing impulsivity. Some areas of the brain, if they're affected, we can become quite primal and very aggressive, but it wasn't clearly that part. Otherwise, they would have given you massive warnings.
Yeah,
so
that's exactly right.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So let's kind of come full circle here. So he died.
He did.
He did. Now, you and I have got very different experiences of that.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that you didn't know my experience.
No.
No. But basically, what happened is things wrapped up. You went on your merry way. We were saying, fantastic, you're on track with life.
Yeah.
That's great. And I don't have a sense of time with when that was. And then out of the blue, I got a phone call from the police from that town, telling me that he was telling people in the community that he knew who I was, that I was the person who helped you, and he blamed me, and that he was coming to kill me, and kill you and the two boys. And they weren't able to do anything because the people he was saying that to weren't prepared to make statements. They didn't feel safe, but they were hearing this on the quiet, and so they couldn't do anything. So they had a job number. They gave me the job number. It's in your file. And they said, when we're going to monitor him, and when he leaves, keeping in mind that he's 3 hours away, it's not far.
No.
When he leaves, we're going to call you, and I want you to leave your work. I want your admin to leave the building, and I need you to go get your children from school and go away somewhere. And I assumed that you had the same phone call.
I had no idea.
And I assumed that you had more detail and didn't want you to worry about me, because you were more of a priority than me really in this. So I was like, well, I'm not going to let you know it's happening to me as well, because I don't want to stress you with that. So I'm sure you're all over that, and so I didn't call you. So then admin disappeared. Poor darling, she'd only even started work here. And she said, does this happen often? I said, no, it doesn't. It's not at all. And I went and grabbed my kids from school and said, hey, guys, we're going to the beach. And off we go. And I was literally at the car park getting the kids from school. So it was only an hour later. Or it was not long. I don't have a complete sense, but I hadn't gotten anywhere. I was just getting organised, really. And then I got another phone call, And the words are absolutely clear in my head. It was, great news, he's dead.
Wow.
And they said that he had died en route, or that he'd died in his efforts to come, or something like that.
Yeah.
I didn't get any more detail. I didn't really care at that stage. I was
Yeah.
just like, okay, my children are safe, actually.
Yeah.
Michelle's safe. The boys are safe. And that was it. And
for all I've experienced, that's still...
And you didn't know any of this?
No, I had no idea. It's blowing me away.
So you had a bit of contact with him at the end. You actually went to make some sort of peace with him, and he made some comment that he won't forget.
Yeah, yeah.
He said, I won't forget. Well, that sounds very revengeful, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Right to the end.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's hard to imagine how this all happened, what you're talking about in the whole time frame. But I did make a point of going and seeing him, and I didn't think that he would have been... It was an assumption on my part that he wouldn't have been capable of doing much physically. But...
because the police said to me, he's dying, he's got nothing to lose.
Yeah, and when you think about it, that's a real threat.
It is. He's dying.
Threat.
He's got nothing to lose.
That's
He
right.
can do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah.
He's got revenge on his mind. I come to mind, which is weird.
Yeah.
I must have represented...
Oh, no, I'm not surprised that he had it in for you.
Really?
Because you stood up to him. You stood up to him that day. He rocked up at the clinic.
Huh.
He didn't get his way.
Right.
He didn't succeed in pushing you around, and he would have known that you were going to stand. And for some reason, when things were going to court with regards to the boys, I asked you to, I don't know what the terminology is for this particular document, but
a psychological report.
Okay.
Probably,
yeah, whatever it was, I asked if you could just start doing that, and it had been suggested by my solicitor that there was no need for that at this point in time. And anyway, we had an appearance in court, and the night before I learned that he had hired my ex-husband had hired the best barrister in Queensland that there is. My solicitor said, this guy is good, he's really good. And we rocked up to Brisbane, and just getting there was this was all last minute. How he managed to just push this through so quickly is beyond me. It was like, we've got to go, you've got to be in Brisbane tomorrow. And I asked you if you had that, and you finished it off and gave that document to me, and we walked up.
Did it all-nighter.
You must have, because my solicitor, when I actually said, look, I've asked Kirsten to go ahead with this, and he went, oh, that's good, even though he had originally said it was not necessary this for that early in the piece. And so he rocked up. So the best barrister in Queensland apparently was there, and then my solicitor rocked up with your document, and the barrister who was representing my husband looked at the document and said, oh, well, I guess it's supervised visits then.
Really?
And that was it. And my solicitor said, I've never seen anything like this.
Wow.
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
We should talk more.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
So it was that quick.
No wonder he hated me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You really were standing in his way, and you weren't going to move.
Well, that makes a lot of sense. See, I didn't know that, and I also didn't remember him coming to the practice. So when the police called me and said that he was going to come and kill me, I thought, well, that's weird. How does he know me? So I obviously didn't remember any of that context at all.
Yes.
Wow. There you go.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
And of course, it's you had this concept, this sense that he had this revenge hanging out for you, and you never relaxed. You always felt like it was unfinished, that he just had this retribution.
Yep.
And now you've just heard this tonight from me, that was his dying wish.
Yeah.
And it was to go out with the blaze of glory, and his brain stopped him.
Yeah.
The police didn't stop him. They were onto him, but I'd like to think they would have.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just a hideous thing to think about with regards to his own boys.
Yes.
Wanting to kill his own boys.
Yeah.
And they did the same thing too. They spilt the beans.
What do you mean?
They told me what he was doing. They exposed him. That night I came home and they dared to tell me that he'd had them on the bed and he was belting them over and over and over.
And that's a very scary thing to have told you, because, you know, then you could say something to him and then he could be very, very dangerous back.
That's right.
So that's quite a terrifying thing.
Yeah. But he would have seen them as opposition as well. But yeah, they had it in them to expose him.
When you walk through the door, when you walk through the door tonight, you were glowing. You're glowing. You know. And I said you haven't changed, but you have actually, because you're just so. You've just got so much, you know, contentment, joy.
Yeah.
You know.
You're absolutely right.
You know when you're kind of a bit giddy. You're giddy happy.
Yeah, I have a beautiful husband, and yeah.
And how long have you guys been together?
We were married in 2008, late 2008.
Really?
So we've just had our 14th wedding anniversary, and he is just beautiful.
So you've come out the other side and well and truly learned what it's like to be with someone who's top shelf, hey?
Absolutely. And what he has done, you know, the boys love him. They love him, and they respect him, but they love him. They love him. And and I've it's a funny thing. I often think, wow, I don't I'm so appreciative for where I am now. I don't how do I put this? I'll put it this way. I often just think, wow, you know, I'm relishing in enjoying. We have 5 kids all together, and it was just such a beautiful journey. And they're just all so beautiful. They're grown up now, but beautiful, beautiful kids. And when I got to the point where I was able to actually relish these kids and be relaxed enough inside to enjoy and truly be aware of what they were saying and soaking them up. I've just relished every minute, you know, of that, and I've often reflected, wow, I wonder what, you know, would have been like, you know, to have had all these kids to the husband that I have now. But I don't say that in a way whereby I'm cheesed off that I missed out. It's just because I've experienced this beauty, the love, the way that I have now, and such a peace. I've just enjoyed every second, and I just relish.
And you wouldn't have it any other way, because otherwise you wouldn't have your 2 boys.
That's right. That's exactly right.
That's the punchline, isn't it?
It is.
So you extracted them from the fire.
Yes.
You brought them into the joy.
That's a really good way of putting it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's right.
You know, I meet people in duress. I meet people when they come along, and you know their life is just in an absolute shitstorm.
Yeah.
And that's when we met.
Yeah.
And I love my job because I get to see people come through the other side. Do you know what I mean? People say, oh, it must be so dark and melancholy and heavy being a psychologist. And, you know, well, it would if you stayed there. But you don't. You get to kind of pull it through, which is really great.
Oh, absolutely.
Extraordinary. But and the real message to people when they're in those situations is it's, okay, yes, it's horrendous and you can't imagine getting out, but you need to create the next chapter. You need to close this.
That's right.
And heal, so that then you're free for the next chapter.
Yeah, that's right.
And to have the courage to to not know the future, but to know that it's going to be better.
Yeah.
And you've got to go and close this chapter. You've got
That's
to get
right.
out. You've got to have. I'm the queen of boundaries. If I had a superpower, that would be it.
Yeah.
And to have boundaries and say, no, this stops now.
Yeah.
And then you get to have the future that you've got.
Yeah.
And I mean, it would have been really scary with you to go and trust love again and to let somebody in at some point, I'm sure.
That's an interesting one, that one, actually.
Yes.
Yeah, very, very interesting. Because what happened really doesn't make sense. It didn't look like a very sensible thing to do at all. And I had absolutely zero interest in it. I didn't even entertain the idea of
Dating,
being with anyone.
being with someone, yeah.
That's right. And I just had this vision of the boys sort of going through university, and then beyond that, maybe not. But I didn't. It really didn't make sense at all. And from from a logical point of view, in a lot of people's opinion, it would have looked really like a very silly thing to do.
No, not at all. Not at all. To go and have a quality person and to make your life richer and to have love.
Yes, I agree with that. I do absolutely agree with that. But I just remember, going over to see my husband now, my now husband, and I hadn't been involved with him at all, and it was just a case of he'd been going through stuff himself, and I had a job at a chiropractic clinic, and he was a client, and he'd just started talking, and I remember thinking, no way, mate. He never said anything. He was just never said anything, but I picked the vibes up, and I just thought, ain't happening. Nope, not on. And anyway, but he was just telling me his story, and his long story short, his children came back to Toowoomba, and it was going to be a 50-50 thing, but his ex-wife didn't come back, so he had his kids full time, and he just said to me, do you want to come and meet the kids? And I found myself saying, yeah, okay, I'll come and meet your kids. And it was when the boys were on their supervised visits, they were away, and I thought, why did I say yes?
Yeah.
Why did I say yes to that?
Yeah.
And I rocked up there, and these three gorgeous little things, at this sliding door peeking out, and and so I just sat down and talked to the kids, which my husband said, my now husband said later on, that was the thing that impressed him the most. He was out the back cooking the barbecue, but I was interested in the kids. But here's the weird thing. I can't really. This is just what happened. I was sitting there talking to him on the lounge chair that night, and I think it was really late, like talked, and went to get in my car, and I can't remember exactly what he said, but what I got was this: if you let this man go, you will regret it for the rest of your life. It was so solid.
You just had that
so solid,
that thought or that sense.
I've only had that a few times, but it was an incredible thing. And the next thought was, people are going to think you're such an idiot. You have just been through what you have been through. If you let this man go, you will regret it for the rest of your life. And now, having been married to him for 14 years, I understand that statement.
Oh, that's
more than ever.
Oh, well, let's finish on that beautiful note. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. That's gorgeous. And I love that that's the full circle, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You get out of a war zone, and then you can have that time of healing and then joy. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just thank God for him.
Well, sweetie, I love that. That's a good ending point. I love that you've come in. Thank you so much. You've done great. You really have. You've done great. So everyone, thanks for coming. If you want to catch me, I've got a website that has all sorts of resources, KirstenHunterAuthor.com, Facebook and Instagram, Kirsten Hunter Author, and Twitter, Kirsten Hunter AU. So we've also, I don't know if you know, there's a YouTube channel, Psych in Your Car, random. And so this is Signpost for Living with Dr. Kirsten Hunter. Thank you for coming, darling. I really, really appreciate it.
pleasure.
You did great.
I hope it helps someone.
Absolutely. See ya.
See you later, Kirsten.